This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal. In Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.
It is 2 hours of unmitigated baseball talk. I know we'll sprinkle in all stuff, but again, this is your show where we get to talk about the Blue Jays, the Mariners, the upcoming Major League Draft. Who's on the hot seat? And I think that's where we'll start, because now all of a sudden we're starting to look at the analytics that are about 40 games into the season, and you're starting to say, well, wait a minute, weren't the Blue Jays 12-5? So it seems like a light year ago that the Blue Jays were hanging out with the likes of the Red Sox and the Yankees, and then all of a sudden we see the beginning. It's almost like we're watching the side of the Titanic graze against the iceberg, as some say. That's how the Titanic went down. So I'll start with you, Lou. When you look at the Toronto Blue Jays, they were 12-5. Now they are, in fact, a sinking ship, multiple games, 4 games below 500. Would it be fair to say that now you're going to start to hear the naysayers, the haters, start to circle the wagons around John Gibbons?
Yeah, I mean, he'll always be a target, because let's keep in mind that he was not hired by this management group. But to say that we're surprised at the performance of the Blue Jays, we've discussed this every week. Even when they were 12-5, we looked at those pitching stats, and it's like no quality starts, bullpens getting burned out, and it hasn't changed. You know, we threw that number out a couple of weeks ago about, will they be 10 games behind on June 1st? Well, fortunately or unfortunately, the Blue Jays are expediting that process. But there's a lot of stuff that's wrong here, and it does definitely start with the starters.
We'll get into the analytics before everything is said and done. But Niall, when I look at this team right now, you can't put it on John Gibbons. I'm the first to be. I have never been a fan of John Gibbons, although I like him as a man. I like him as an interview. I don't know if he's ever been the true fit for the Blue Jays, although I guess a manager in 2018 just simply has to manage personalities. But Niall, I look at what they are not, and they are not healthy. It has been years since they've had a full 25-man roster that you just felt good about. And that, to me, is not John Gibbons' fault.
Well, they don't really have a shortstop right now. I mean, Troy Tulowitzki, God knows when he'll be back. Ledmus Diaz, he's, I guess, still a ways away from returning. You've had Nervis Solarte take a turn at shortstop. They've also used Richard Arania, but he's now back down in Buffalo. And Gio Urshela, who's really a third baseman by trade and not really a shortstop. So, I mean, you just look right there. And, of course, the starters, they are not giving the Jays any innings. And there's only so much John Gibbons can do at this point. I mean, it seems like it's a major victory these days when a Blue Jay starter actually reaches 5 innings. And that didn't happen today with Marco Estrada. And the bullpen's getting beat up. John Axford, I'll tell you what, I haven't been too impressed with what I've seen from him. Tyler Clippard had a very rough night last night. I think the Chickens are right now just coming home to roost right now.
KP, they are in the bottom 5th in ERA, and what I mean of the 30 teams in Major League Baseball, if my eyes are not deceiving me, they are ranked right now 23rd of the 30 teams in ERA. Here's something that for me is slid under the radar. Obviously, Roberto Osuna, this is a situation that has multiple layers. I'm not going to get into the court case. I always have said, innocent until proven guilty. We will let justice run its course with regards to him externally. But the Blue Jays right now, Niall brings up John Axford, who had a pretty good spring. Everybody was looking at the velocity. It was there. Ryan Tepera, Aaron Loop. There were a couple of guys that could piecemeal it together. But again, the loss of Roberto Osuna is definitely now starting to show its teeth, because the Blue Jays just can't seem to hold on to leads. For example, burning 4 runs in the bottom of the ninth the other night.
Oh, absolutely. The absence of Osuna is huge, no question. But also, we go back to what Lou had alluded to some time ago, and even just today. The starters need to go deep in terms of giving the bullpen a rest. We knew all along that when you have starters that can't go 5 innings or only go 5-6 innings, and you have the bullpen come in to try and go the last 3 innings on a consistent basis, you're going to tire everybody out. And you might have closer not being there at the moment. But again, the starters need to step up. Somebody's got to say, hey, give me the ball. I'm going to go 8 innings tonight. Let the bullpen rest. But we're not seeing that so far this season. And getting to injuries, I don't really like to use injuries as an excuse, Rob, just because of the fact that every team goes through injuries. We look at the LA Dodgers last year, how many injuries they had last year, and still won 104 games, tops in the big league. So every team gets injured. I don't really use that as an excuse for teams not doing well.
Toronto Blue Jays, outside of the Texas Rangers, now we're going to get into just subtle analytics here, have thrown the second most pitches in baseball. This, to me, screams guys that can't find the strike zone, guys that are walking too much. And right now, when you look at pitches per inning, they are way up in this. They're averaging almost 18 pitches per inning, which means your starters, as you mentioned, KP, are really good. You're looking at 4, 5, maybe 6 innings. Before we get to Tampa Bay's thoughts on the starter, quote unquote, I want to talk about the fact that there just isn't a bona fide guy that you could look at in that Blue Jays rotation and say, that is our stopgap guy. That's what made Roy Halladay so great, is you knew that every 5th day, no matter if you were on a 4-game winning streak or a 4-game losing streak, that Roy Halladay was the one guy that could stop it or keep it going. Niall, I look at this Blue Jays team, I see Estrada, I see Happ, I see, a banged up Marcus Stroman, but again, you look at Aaron Sanchez, none of these guys elicit being the stopper. The one guy that no matter where you're at is that spark plug in the rotation. And I'm not really sure if I even have the answer as to how you turn one of those guys into that kind of a character.
Throw strikes. I guess that's the way it goes. That's the only way. You look at Aaron Sanchez, 5 walks in 5 innings. That's not great. I think Jay Happ's probably maybe your closest thing to a stopper. He's the only one who really seems to be giving them any innings. Marcus Stroman, we don't know when he's going to be back or how healthy he's going to be. So right now it's basically throw strikes.
One of the things, and me, I'm not a big fan of the new sexy stats, but one that's very interesting that I believe in is, of course, they call it the whiff rate, swings and misses. Now, you look at the Blue Jays starters. Outside of J.A. Happ, not a single starter has more than 43 strikeouts, which means they're popping like 4 strikeouts a game. So when guys are swinging, they are making contact. No Tulowitzki. Donaldson gone for a while, mishmash infield, those ground balls become hits, the pitchers get stretched out, they don't last. It's a lot of stuff coming together, but it all starts with, these guys are not getting guys to swing and miss.
Absolutely. And in this era, the last couple of years, you see strikeouts going up. You see home runs being hit more and more. But, guys are striking out. And if you on a pitching staff, you don't have guys that can go out there and strike people out, hey, you're not going to get it done. And, again, this stat, I'm with Lou here. I don't really kind of believe in these modern stats that they've come up with, that they keep coming up with every day. But the contact, pitching to contact, and getting swing and misses, that's huge. And if your starters, if your pitching staff aren't getting swing and misses, your staff is going to be in trouble. You're going to give up a lot of runs, a lot of walks, and that just spells disaster for the bullpen that has to come in and clean up the mess. Starters can't go 5 innings.
Well, they have a mediocre bullpen at best. I think if you're going into spring training with a lot of fingers crossed, chances are you're not going to be able to. You'll expose your warts by at least the 40th or 50th game. All right, we'll circle back on the Toronto Blue Jays and what they've got to do to fix this. But Major League Baseball late last year decided that they were going to get together and have a committee that studied if the baseballs were in fact juiced or if they were not. Well, Major League Baseball has come forward, gentlemen, and said that the baseballs were not juiced, but they are traveling like they never have before. Now, it started with the players. The players like Marcus Stroman, like Aaron Sanchez, like insert name here, were all suggesting that the baseball over the last couple of years was even being manufactured differently. Maybe the seams were a little slicker. Maybe there was something to this ball that was different. Major League Baseball set a new single season record last year with over 6,000 home runs. The previous record was just 5,600. So to think that there was a 400, nearly 500 500 additional home runs in one single year, and yet the ball hasn't changed. They've got their testing in place. Something has to give. So where do you say that this truly falls?
Well, I mean, I found it very amusing that, of course, they said the ball is traveling further and it's doing this and that, but we don't know why. Because I still have memories of 87, which was the year of home run.
But guys never heard of getting 20, 30,
Brady
40 home
Anderson,
runs.
52 home runs. And it turned out that the ball was being wound tighter. Now, I don't know, maybe they're feeding cows something different for the cover on the ball, but there's no question that ball is flying out. How are they going to adjust for it? You know, you've heard a whole bunch of things bandied about. And yeah, the home run ball is a great thing for baseball. No questions asked. But you still want to have everything kind of being equal over time if possible. So they're going to have to do something. I've heard suggestions about the mound again, which they brought down in 68 because pitchers were too dominant. They may have to tweak it again, or else, you know, pitchers just ain't going to make
See, I don't think
money.
they will tweak it again, because right now, as we all know, what looks good on television and what looks good with a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old is guys that can hit the ball 480 feet. So, I mean, now I don't know about you, but for me, I've always been honesty. If you've changed the baseball, just say we changed the baseball, because to not admit that you've changed it, and now this committee's come forward and said, well, they haven't technically changed it, but it is different. Now you're going to get all the fans' perception, and of course, we never err on the side of, you know, truth. We always look for the meat in between the potato.
Well, you'd like to think honesty would be the best policy, but you know, but the thing is, too, you're getting a lot more strikeouts in the game now, too. I mean, reading an article in USA Today not that long ago saying that right now, at the rate it's going, that there could be more strikeouts than hits after a complete regular season. So I don't know. I guess maybe the pitchers are kind of getting some advantages too by getting more strikeouts and not allowing the ball to be put in play. And I guess it's a pretty good incentive if the ball is juiced. Maybe you do want to throw more strikes and get ahead of hitters.
Okay, just so we're clear before we go to KP on this, the composition of a baseball is you've got the stitching, you've got the rawhide, you've got the twine, which is inside, and then you've got cork. And you've got a couple different styles of cork. You've got, of course, it's almost like if you were to cut earth in half. You've got all the different layers that go all the way to the magma core. So the reality is the studies have been come out. We've had people that have x-rayed baseballs trying to find ways. And there is a way, according to some, that you can juice a baseball. Now, KP, I know that if you're driving, you can't see the graphic, but the graphic suggests that if you are to lessen the outer core and intensify the middle core, which is the thicker of the two corks, that essentially that can change the power, or kind of like an Indian rubber ball as opposed to a tennis ball. So they're saying that maybe this is where the problem is, that you have all the ingredients to make yourself a nice Thanksgiving dinner, but this time you've put a lot more meat into the baseball as opposed to the stuffing. And this is one of the challenges that Major League Baseball can say, no, we've still got all the same ingredients, but now you've got certain committees that are coming forward and saying, yeah, you've got all the same ingredients, but you've put a lot more of this ingredient in, which is essentially changing the baseball. So this is, to me, one of the toughest things that baseball is ever going to have to prove, and it's a real easy one to deny because of the gray matter.
Well, I think, though, this, whether or not they acknowledge, you know, what's going on with the baseballs, this is gonna, or it has the potential of ruining the game, because, Rob, as you were just saying, what sells? Home runs. We all tune into, you know, sports, you know, channels to watch a home run, to see the long balls get hit. But if you talk to the players that you know, who've retired and they're watching the game now, they're saying, hey, what's happened to the steal? What's happened to the bunt? Like, you know, those two things are a lost art. And I think we touched on this a couple of weeks ago. You know, we don't see a lot of bunting unless you're in the National League with the pitcher, you know, at the plate. You don't see, you know, as many steals as in the past, you know, in different eras. So this whole thing of, you know, strikeouts, home runs, strikeouts, home runs, we're not playing a video game here. We're trying to, you know, play a game of baseball. We want to teach kids the fundamentals of the game. And, you know, if they see your home runs are the way to make them, you know, be on highlights, it turns it from a team sport to something that's, you know, like basketball or something, you know, it's like, hey, just look at me. It's all me hitting the home runs, getting the strikeouts as a pitcher is not a team sport anymore.
Okay, you brought up a good point. Actually brought up a good phrase and a bunch of good points, but ruining the game of baseball. I always look at baseball from one of two ways. You're either lessening the game or you're helping the game. And Tampa Bay has come forward. This will be our last topic before we get to the first break. And they're using their closer as their starter, which means a guy like Sergio Romo comes into the game, throws gas for the first inning or inning and third, or dare we say 2 innings, and then they go to their quote starter. It is very unique, and it has captivated the imagination of baseball, because all of a sudden you're thinking that guy that you burn at the end of the game to lock things down is now the guy at the front of the game that is setting the pace or the tone for this game. I know that we haven't gotten into this too in depth, but just a quick yes or no off the top of your head. Is this the next generation of Moneyball? And I'm not talking contracts and finding pieces, but is this the next evolution of baseball, where now instead of just assuming that big old workhorse at the front of the game's the guy, that you can piece together the first 4 or 5 innings and really put the analytics in your favor?
It's certainly something a lot of teams will look at, and yeah, going in the first inning, the start of the game, that's something different. But I mean, Andrew Miller, who for the last couple of years has been like the bullpen star, because he's coming in wherever in the game, and this is just kind of an evolution of that. I know we've jokingly talked about things like this before, regarding the Canadians. Like, hey, you know what? They should just throw this guy out, start, get an inning out of him, and then keep rolling it over, get guys switching bats. But in order to do something like that, you are going to require a pitching staff of 13 to 14 guys, which then is going to shrink you down to 11 position players. And unless they expand the rosters, which the union would love to see, the association, you can't really look at this as being a long-term plan for most teams, because you just don't have the bodies for it.
But you know what it shows is that you don't need a 5-man rotation, because the reality is if you have 3 workhorses, there's probably, 4 or 5 teams in Major League Baseball that have a bona fide trio of guys that can really go out there and get you quality starts. But day 4, day 5 is where you got to piecemeal something together, which makes this conversation an interesting one, because maybe this is essentially now the solution.
Well, I mean, we've seen it in Vancouver already. You see pitchers like, I remember Matt Shannon last year, or Colton Laws. They get short 1 inning or 2 inning starts, and then the regular quote-unquote starter comes in. And as Lou's pointed out, I mean, you can get away with that, especially in Vancouver with the roster size. Of course, you have 14, 15, some, or maybe up to 20 pitchers.
Yeah.
You can definitely get away with it. But yeah, I think it's something that teams are going to look at. And you see Tampa Bay doing it already, and they can afford to, seeing they're not really expected to contend in the American League East. And I don't know, I guess when you turn it around to the Blue Jays, who could do it for them? Maybe a Ryan Tepera, maybe an Aaron Loop, or maybe some change of pace.
And the one thing that I think, KP, is really intriguing is the fact that Romo went night to night. He went back to back, which is also something, because you talked about, Lou, expanding this roster to an ungodly 13 pitchers. But the reality is if you have your closer who can go Friday night and then again Saturday night, who's to say that maybe there aren't 2 guys that can do this? Your setup guy and your closer, and then you've reduced it to 11.
Well, now you're going to start, if you start doing that with your closer, the risk you're going to start running is that those 1 or 2 horses you have on the staff, they go 8 innings, and then you have to bring in, bullpen guy number 7 to close it out. So you're going to be giving wins away by putting in guys who are not mentally able to close. Now, Romo's an interesting case because, of course, he was a setup guy and he was a closer with San Francisco. So he's done the whole gamut, and he's always shown that resiliency to bounce back day after day. Not a lot of guys who can do that. You might get that out of a closer for 2 or 3 nights if they're getting their 12-pitch save. Getting through a first inning, it's going to be interesting. I like that they're trying something different, because they don't have the means to, really stack their team. And it'll be very, very interesting come the playoffs this year if some teams take a hint out of that and say, hey, let's do that.
Well, I agree with Lou. He brings up a good point in the fact that...
By the way, Lou, you're 8 for 8 with KP agreeing with you this segment. This is uncharacteristic. Lou, I'm so impressed right now.
I was going to say, Rob, Lou brings up a great point because of the fact that, if you start to bring in guys to pitch however number of innings and you pull them, you run the risk of running out of pitchers if the game goes extra innings. And that's a big risk. Now you're down to your seventh guy or your worst guy, so to speak. And the chances are you're going to lose that ball game. And now I'm going to also say that with minor leagues, that's a different ball game. With the minor leagues, of course, you can tinker with this because guys are on pitch limits or innings limits, so that's possible. And you have guys that are making rehab starts or rehab appearances. So in minor leagues, it works. That's fine. But in the big leagues, I think if Tampa Bay manages to win a few games using this kind of method or this system that they've come up with, then other teams are going to copy them because again. In pro sports, is about copying systems or methodologies or whatever, as long as it works. If it doesn't work, teams are probably not going to go for this. So it all depends on how this works out with how the Rays are doing it with, Romo starting back-to-back games or, going an inning here, starting and going a couple of innings there. It should be interesting to see what happens.
Well, we will have to find out because as soon as it works for one team, it'll work for everybody in some way, shape, or form. All right, we'll take a break here. When we come back, you're listening, of course, to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice. We had a chance in New York to almost see an all-Japanese pitching matchup. We're talking about Shohei Ohtani taking on Masahiro Tanaka. Now, of course, Mike Scioscia has come out and decided that maybe he will realign the stars to make sure that doesn't happen. But has the Japanese craze faded? Because I remember when Ichiro first came over. I remember when Hideki Arabu came over, if you really want to go back a little bit. But to think that is the last of the true Japanese sensations to be playing in Major League Baseball, a little sad for me. Or has Shohei Ohtani at just 23 opened up the next generation to come from Japan and make their name? Because again, without Ohtani, you've got a lot of guys long in the tooth, i.e. Ichiro, i.e. Masahiro Tanaka, but the next generation might have been saved by one man. We'll debate that. We'll talk Vladdy. We'll talk much more. You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. Right now, gentlemen, we look at the American League, and it is Houston and Boston, two teams that we thought would be there. And the Yankees are hovering around at 31 wins. Everybody else is a distant, several games off the pace. You've got Milwaukee with the most wins of any team in the National League. There is one 30-win team in the entire National League. All of a sudden, you look up and there are three, almost four if you include Seattle's 29 wins. Of the teams in the American League, and I know this is kind of a loaded question, Yankees, Boston, Houston, Seattle. Did you ever think that you'd be putting Seattle in that upper echelon almost, 50 games into the season now? I did not see that coming.
No, I didn't either, but I don't know. There's just something about this Mariners team. Doesn't matter. I mean, KP alluded to it earlier. I mean, every team has injuries, and, the Blue Jays have had theirs. The Mariners have definitely had their share of injuries, yet they're able to overcome it and, nearly pulled off a sweep against Oakland today. I mean, after winning 2 out of 3 in Oakland, and they come home for a bit of a homestand now as they take on the Twins. But no, the Mariners just keep on finding a way, even though Felix Hernandez isn't the same old Felix Hernandez anymore. He did kind of redeem himself a little bit, but had a bit of a rough start. But that was the difference today in Oakland. But yeah, the Mariners just keep finding ways to win.
Yeah, and the Angels right now are nipping at their heels, a game and a half back. Mike Trout with his 15th home run against the mighty Blue Jays, who we'll circle back and get. But when you talk about the Angels, it's amazing because it's been Mike Trout's world and everybody else is just kind of eye candy. But now you got Shohei Ohtani. And Shohei Ohtani, I don't know if many guys from Japan have been able to come over and live up to the hype immediately the way that they have. I know that Yu Darvish came over and had hype and lived up to it. I know that, of course, when we first saw Ichiro, he immediately lived up to the hype.
And Daisuke Matsuzaka, briefly.
Yeah, briefly. There's a few guys that can.
Yeah.
But at 23 years old, this is a bit of a different taste that we're getting because a lot of times we see guys that have been established Japanese baseball players professionally for years, and then all of a sudden they want to test their mettle against the best in Major League Baseball. To see Shohei Ohtani is to give a new generation of baseball fans in North America a taste of a potential Japanese superstar who is just about to enter his prime. I've always said that Japanese baseball, Korean baseball is the best kept secret in North America because you just don't get enough of it to truly appreciate the style of baseball that it is. I'm not saying whether it's inferior or superior. I'm just saying I've loved the style when I see it at the World Baseball Classic, at World Championships. There is just an elegance to that game. Now, all of a sudden, you've got Mike Trout on a team with Shohei Ohtani, who at times is stealing the show. Has he done enough in a very brief, sample size to reinvigorate the curiosity of a generation of fans in North America to at least look over the ocean and see what's going on in Japan?
Without a question. I mean, not only has he been an above average pitcher, he's been an above average hitter. So we're not talking about a great performance for a Japanese player. We're talking about something that has not been seen in 100 years in Major League Baseball. Now, he's an outlier in that case where he's playing both sides. But for the longest time, the players who came over were pitchers. Started with Hideo Nomo. He's got a no-hitter. And then you saw all these other pitchers coming through. The closer was Seattle.
Kazuhiro Sasaki, yes.
And then Matsui was really the first big bat. And boy, was he a big bat. Yep. These guys can play. The thing that makes Ohtani different is that they got him when he was 23 years old. And the posting system to get a player from Japan has always been very, very onerous. And you have to, I'm going to bring up an analogy here. It's like getting hockey players out of Russia. It took a long time to get them out young without defecting. But then once they started seeing the benefit of bringing their game to a forefront, they allow them to leave younger and younger and younger. And this is going to open up a whole new world of players who are major league ready because they've been playing in a major league.
And I also think from a Japanese baseball player's perspective, now all of a sudden you're looking at the success that Shohei is having. Obviously, he's an anomaly in the fact that he's a two-way guy, which is something that we've not really wrapped our head around even yet at the immediate success that he's having on both sides of that equation. But Niall, when I look right now at the fact that Major League Baseball this Sunday had an opportunity to have Shohei Ohtani go head-to-head with Masahiro Tanaka before, of course, he got pushed back due to a workload issue, Mike Scioscia. I sit back and I say to myself, that would have drawn the interest of maybe the biggest Japanese media push we've seen since probably Ichiro searching for 3,000 hits.
Oh, no doubt about it. And, again, he's just so unique. I mean, this is really the Japanese version of Babe Ruth. And you wonder what's going to happen in the All-Star game, because I'm sure he's going. Is he going to go as both? Is he also going to maybe take part in the home run derby? I mean, that's, there's just so many possibilities with them. And, you kind of figure maybe he'll slow down a little bit, but he hasn't. I mean, I was fortunate to be able to see him pitch in Seattle earlier this month, and man, his pitches are just absolutely nasty. Fastball, splitter. I mean, it's just the movement. I mean, I remember he made Nelson Cruz look absolutely sick on 3 pitches, struck him out. And, he's just an incredible talent. And, yeah, absolutely. He's definitely going to invigorate. I think we're going to probably see more and more of these types of players coming out of Japan very shortly, I'm sure.
All right. So the GM of the Angels, Billy Epler, came out and said that here's the deal. He didn't even play catch for the second consecutive day. It was a light bullpen session. They're really trying to make sure that his workload is managed because, again, 23, first time in North America, he's not ready for 200 innings. He says, quote, I have the utmost respect for what pitchers do. They're the most tired people when the game is over. You make 90, 95, 100, 105, 110, 115, 120 explosions. That's a lot in my opinion. Then you add in, when it comes to Ohtani, his cage work and the game and so on and so forth. There's a lot on this individual's plate. We are just trying to be mindful of that and understand where we are in the calendar. It is simple as that. KP, obviously everybody in New York would have gone bananas to see one of the greats as far as Masahiro Tanaka going head-to-head. Ohtani apparently will be available in a pinch hitting situation if they get there, which of course would be pretty sexy to see Tanaka versus Ohtani. But the Angels, obviously is that even the right word? Taking care of their major prospect here when it comes to Shohei Ohtani. Do you agree with that at this point of the season? Or you see an opportunity for a young Ohtani to take on one of his heroes? Would that be something that maybe you would give to Ohtani to make the decision on his own?
Well, I'm assuming that they're trying to, take the pressure off of the kid so that he doesn't, fail in a big spot. And I respect that, and let's say if I were running a team, I would probably do the same thing. We want to protect our player. We signed him to, this contract. He's an investment, and maybe, we think he's not ready. In this situation, we're not going to put the pressure on him to perform because we've got Mike Trout, we've got Albert Pujols, we've got other guys.
Okay, but not to cut you off, but I'll go right back to you, KP. This is like telling Sidney Crosby that, oh, by the way, we're going to sit you for the game against Wayne Gretzky. And I'm not saying that Masahiro Tanaka is Wayne Gretzky in ability, but Shohei Ohtani getting the opportunity on the biggest stage against the New York Yankees, who in Japan are the New York Yankees, to have that head-to-head matchup. Is there not another opportunity that they could maybe pass on? Maybe next time when he's playing Oakland or a no-name team? I mean, this is an opportunity to go Japan, your best against the previous generation's best, and all of a sudden your GM saying, we're going to give you a rest day.
Well, I mean, there's also the psychological aspect of the game which we can't overlook. If let's say Shohei Ohtani starts the game, as a DH against Tanaka and goes 0 for 3, 0 for 4. What's it going to do to his psyche? How would that affect him for the rest of the week? How would that affect him for the rest of the month, the season? I guess that's something that teams want to kind of pay attention to. You don't want to put a kid, like you said, he's just 23 years old. You don't want to put that much pressure on a kid that's in a foreign country playing, perhaps representing his own country on the Angels. And when you have other guys on the team, like I said, Pujols or Trout, guys that can carry the offensive load for this ball club.
Cautious. Strikes me as cautious.
I don't know if it's that cautious. I mean, he's young, and there's still kind of no major league manager, or organization has any experience dealing with a guy who's going to get 100 at bats and pitch X amount of innings. And this is all new to them as well. And obviously they're going to be a certain amount of caution there because you don't want to be wrong. I mean, there's no question when it comes to professional sports, with very, very few exceptions, organizations would rather not be wrong than be right.
No, but and the only thing that I'm saying here is cool. I'm all for what you're saying, and I don't think anybody's brought up anything wrong here. But you look at the schedule and you see who they're playing and you say, okay, he's going to make 25, 30 starts this year in a perfect knock-on-wood world. Mm-hmm. Is this not one of those starts where you look at what's on the horizon and you say to yourself, it is an all-Japanese sensation matchup. It's Tanaka versus Ohtani. That is a big-ticket item, not just for the ownership.
And for the fan, to see that game in May would be fantastic. For the Angels, to see that game in October would be much better.
Fair. Yeah. Sexy, but I mean, at the same time,
it would have been.
I don't know.
Awesome.
I look at it like this: he's 23 years old. He's already earned his keep here by my standard. What he's done offensively and from a pitching perspective, I just think to myself, sure, you want to see him in October? That's fine by me. But if you're going to make 23 to 26 starts, let's just round down. Why does it have to be this start that he has to miss?
Well, I think KP alluded to it earlier, just to take the pressure off, because New York, I mean, let's face Los Angeles, that's not exactly a small market. And of course, he has the hordes of Japanese media following his single and solitary move. But yeah, maybe New York, everything is bigger. Everything gets played up bigger, and maybe
this is what you want.
Oh, absolutely.
You want to, I don't know. I agree. I'm on the fence. Man, I agree because, like I said, I totally understand taking care of your blue chip guy.
And you only have so many bullets in your arm too. So I don't know. Maybe he might have brought up something with the trainer. Who knows? We're not privy to that. But you only have so many. You only have so many bullets in your arm. Maybe you want to save them for maybe divisional opponents when you're battling for a wild card.
Man, you guys are so safe. I love it. All right, we'll take a break. Yeah, it's all right. It's fine. I understand. You got to remember, my other half of the job is I'm a PR guy, so I see that matchup. I'm all in on that. There's no doubt about it. All right, we'll take a break here. We do have to. When we come back, we promise you we're going to have some Vladdy chatter in this first hour. And maybe the coolest job that is out there this summer. Minor League Baseball writer Ben Hill is very well known, and he's actually, by the end of this season, going to complete his tour of all 160 minor league stadiums. It is truly a feat. A couple of years ago, he came through Vancouver, one of the nicest guys in the business. But he is celiac, and by that, there's a number of things dietary-wise he cannot enjoy. So he has hired a designated eater. His only job the entire summer is to travel around minor league baseball fields and eat what they're offering at the stadium. You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. I'm joined by KP Wee, Niall O'Donohoe, Lou Filippo. We will get into our what seems to be becoming a regular weekly segment. We should have it sponsored, Vladdy Talk. But Niall, I'll start with you. When I look at Vladimir Guerrero Jr., obviously AA is almost at the point that it's not testing him anymore.
It's not a challenge.
Well, and this is the thing. You keep waiting for, Christmas to end. And there just seems to be another present under the tree and another present under the tree. The Blue Jays' hand is not going to be forced. They've got their understanding what they're going to do with him, be it at AAA or the Major League level. But from a fan's perspective, you see the Blue Jays struggling offensively in so many categories. It's a vanilla team personality-wise. One guy looks like he can fix it all. And yet, we know what the right answer is.
Yeah, again, and of course, they're going back to defense. They're going back to, can he play a solid third base once he gets to the big leagues? But definitely, the Eastern League is not a challenge for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. anymore. I think we're going to see him in Buffalo sooner rather than later. I think it's time for him to get challenged, because clearly, he's been in the Eastern League now long enough that first time around pitchers are making adjustments, and yet he's able to make the adjustments, and he's hitting for power, and I think he's going to probably try and hit 500 the way he's going right now.
Yeah, and I wouldn't bet against him just based on everything that we've seen. Now, Lou, you were saying that in SI there was a pretty long, lengthy interview with him and everybody that's around him. And this wasn't necessarily a piece about Vladdy at 5 years old under the shadows of his dad. This is the current state of Vladimir Guerrero.
Yeah, it was John Taylor, who's one of the baseball writers for Sports Illustrated. For those of us who are a bit older, remember it used to be the Bible, but they're still very relevant. And it's like the third story on their website. And it's been up since this afternoon. And basically, it's calling him the hottest prospect since Bryce Harper. And it talks about exactly what we're looking at here. And John Schneider, who was up here for quite a few years in Vancouver,
manager of the Canadians,
and is managing him now.
Yeah.
And basically, he kind of chuckles when he's being asked about the talent, because this talent it's clear. There's no question what he can do. He was asked directly, can he hit in the majors? And John said, absolutely, yes, he can. Best prospect he's ever seen. And he has seen some good ones. And what's interesting about this article, because we've talked for weeks and weeks about, are they going to bring him up? Are they going to bring him up? Are they going to bring him up? I wonder how much pressure something like this puts on them to bring him up.
There's signs at Rogers Center that fans are making, we want Vladdy.
Yes.
Like it's at that point. KP, if you're the front office, if you're the general manager of a Major League Baseball team and you see what's going on at AA, you see your fans calling for it, he's on page 3 of SI, how much pressure are you feeling, and do you buckle to that pressure?
Well, it's interesting, Rob, because as a front office, as a management team, you don't listen to what the fans tell you to do. That would be like the New York Giants listening to their fans and giving Eli Manning his starting quarterback job because of a huge amount of protests for benching him in the first place.
Well, they never should have benched him, but maybe this might not be a good analogy for you, because I don't know if I agree with you on this topic.
Well, we've mentioned the Chris Bryant thing before, right? And the Bryant situation was very, very different because Bryant was 3 years older. So at the end of the day, I think it's still the same deal here with Vladdy, which is until Donaldson is moved, you just don't bring him up because he's got nowhere to play.
So KP, is he the domino? Josh Donaldson?
Absolutely, because again, as Lou just alluded to, Donaldson's there, where is he going to play? Where is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. going to play? You're not going to DH him at the age of 19. You want him to play a natural position, and if third base is not available, he's not going to be there.
I'm just saying, I came from the school of, if you can hit, they'll find a spot for you. I mean, that was always the old adage that it doesn't matter where, they will find a way for you. And I mean, I know that we're all like enamored with Kendrys Morales coming in and pitching the inning, and every once in a while, Haley's Comet flies by and he has a good day.
Hey, it's Ohtani versus Morales.
Oh, my goodness. That's a sad state because we're saying it all tongue-in-cheek in the way that it is. All right. We've only got a couple of minutes for this one. Gentlemen, if somebody called you and said, we want you to travel around to minor league baseball stadiums all year, and your only job is to eat the food and report back to me what you thought.
Oh, that's a no-brainer. That's an absolute no-brainer. I will actually pay my own way to do that, but are you kidding? Ballpark food is legendary.
Ballpark food is good. By the way, one of the best, so in Spokane, they have all their little food trucks, they're not trucks, but they're little designated areas. Their Asian cuisine is called Intentional Wok. W-O-K. Nice. And I've always remembered that one. I thought that was fantastic. KP's looking at me like, what's so funny? Ben Hill, by the way, is the person that needed the person to be the designated eater, who's come through Vancouver, has not witnessed the 3-foot hot dog. KP is the only guy at this table that has taken on the 3-footer and won. Is that the one item at Nat Bailey Stadium that you would recommend to fans this year that they come out and try?
Oh, absolutely. You're at the bat, you got to try the 3-foot hot dog.
Why?
Well, because where is it being served in other ballparks around North America?
There's no question.
It's a hair on your chest thing. Come on, let's call it what it is.
You have to have it because it's there. Why did they climb Everest? Because it's there.
Exactly.
If there is a 3-foot hot dog at a ballpark,
you go for it.
Man must eat it.
Absolutely.
Right,
okay, by the way, it's called the yard dog, and we all got mad in the organization. We wanted to call it the meter dog. Well, meter is twofold. It's meter dog, and of course, we're in Canada.
But then you're 6 inches short.
Story of my life. All right, we'll take a break here. When we come back, we will get into the second hour of Rob Fay Nation Radio. We will circle back on the Toronto Blue Jays, talk a little Mariners, take your calls, and do a whole bunch of stuff. That's Lou Filippo, KP Wee, Niall O'Donohoe. I'm Rob Fay. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. If you'd like to join in the conversation at 604-280-1040, if you want to agree with KP, who's agreed with every single thing that Lou has said today. Usually what we try to do is we try to have debate on this show. We like to have a little bit from the left, a little bit from the right. KP, I don't know what you ate today. Don't ever eat it again. You've done nothing. And it's funny because KP walks in. I don't know if you've ever met KP, but the statistical assassin walks in and he's always got a smile on his face and he's always ready to take on Lou. I don't know what it is. I don't know where you guys have had your differences in the past, but I always look forward to Lou versus KP. Me and Niall just sit back and we watch the festivities.
Watch the Pier 6 brawl.
And then all of a sudden, KP agrees with Lou. And he agrees with Lou and agrees with Lou. So the whole first hour was a love-in, but I think we'll definitely get something here in the second hour. Okay, so we're going to talk some Toronto Blue Jays who right now are struggling. Kind of like the guy that forgot to wear deodorant at the nightclub. Even Chantal gets a kick out of that one. Okay, anyways. So here's the deal. Toronto Blue Jays right now, who's the fall guy? Who's the fall guy in all of this? Is it the front office? Is it the training staff? Is it the on-field personnel, i.e. the guys that are playing the positions? Is it the manager, John Gibbons? If I was to go just simply around the horn here, where do you lay the blame on the current state of the sub-500 Toronto Blue Jays?
Well, there's enough blame to go around all over the place. I mean, there's certainly some blame with the front office.
I think he's going to agree with you on this, by the way.
You can't really blame Gibbons on this one. And even though at the end of the day, he's going to be the fall guy because he certainly wasn't hired by this crew. But this is just... where do you start here? I mean, there's so many things that have gone wrong for this team. I mean, they should just change the name to Toronto Murphy's Law because everything that could possibly go wrong has gone wrong.
I like that. I like that name.
Their highest paid players right, have missed time. Well, Tulowitzki's still not back.
And have not been very good either.
No, when they are there, I mean, we're all talking, when Donaldson was out, when he comes back, he's coming back at 226, which is going to drop his trade value. And, it's the ghost in the room. He's holding Guerrero back on the farm. There's so much stuff that's gone wrong here. It's hard to pin it on one. It's a group effort.
Well, I'd have to say front office / training staff. I mean, there is all this talk that the Jays are on the cutting edge of training performance, and all you see are injuries, and more injuries. And, I know Troy Tulowitzki, he was always injury prone before he came to Toronto, but it hasn't gotten any better. Marcus Stroman, he's had his foibles, and Aaron Sanchez too with the blister. Word. And I don't know, foibles. I don't know where that popped up from. Foibles is the word right of the now. There you go.
Well, and before we get to UKPUs, they went a different way with their training staff this year. They went and they got a young lady who I think is one of the most respected, up and comers within the organization, and had great ties to Marcus Stroman coming out of Duke. And I sit here and I say to myself, well, if we're dealing with the same thing again, and I think it's fair to say that we're dealing with the same thing again, I got to think that there's got to be a little bit to blame here, because on the training staff, because the reality is you've had 2 or 3 guys that already have dead arm syndrome. Which to me, and by the way, it's Nikki Huffman. My apologies. I said the young lady. I look around right now and I say to myself, listen, you've got Gil Kim. You've got all those guys that are working hard in the baseball ops department with player development. But you've got the high performance department, which is led by Angus Mugford. And then you've got Nikki, who got the big bump. Foon Chong, former SFU guy, by the way, who's now also working on it. But I see Marcus Stroman on the shelf. I see guys that have Josh Donaldson a little bit earlier in the year. You can't have this happen this early in the season. Now, I know that Marcus tweaked himself to try and, have different release points, and Josh Donaldson's Josh Donaldson, Troy Tulowitzki's Troy Tulowitzki. But I do agree with you, Niall, that I think that's where some of the blame has to be placed. KP, where would you put the blame, if need be?
Well, the original question was, where do you lay the blame? And I'm going to go with a manager on this one, John Gibbons. Now, you can blame the injuries, you can blame this and that. I mean, this is a roster you've got to work with. You do your best. And there are guys in the major leagues. You look at guys like Tony La Russa, Joe Torre, Jim Leland. Players would go through the wall to play for these managers. And John Gibbons, well, what can we say about him? Our players, even though there are a lot of injuries, the next man up, step up, go out there and pitch some innings, go out there and hit the ball. I mean, the easiest person to blame would be the manager. The easiest person to fire would be the manager. And I'm going to say, you're a manager of a baseball team in the big leagues. You got to know how to motivate your guys to play hard, to go out there and compete, and getting blown out, on a consistent basis the last couple of weeks. I don't know. I just got to say the blame falls on his shoulder.
We were just discussing food a minute ago, and what's the old expression about chicken salad? Well, I'm sorry, that's exactly what they're dealing with here. If you go as little as 2 years ago, you could sit there and look at that lineup and say, okay, you know what? We've got, they've got among the best infields in all of baseball.
Agreed.
And they've got among the best outfields in all of baseball. Right now, they may have among the best infields in the International League and maybe among the best outfields in the PCL. It is no longer a full major league roster. They've got way too many pieces in there where it's like, hey, let's see if we can get by this year with that guy. Let's see if we can get by this year with that guy. And I'm not going to complain about it. They took their shot a couple of years ago. And I'm that go for it. And if you fail, you fail, and you pay the price. Okay. And this is the price you pay.
And the 2 shots were, in my estimation, on Alex Anthopoulos' watch. Correct. Even though he wasn't there at the finish line, he's the guy that assembled the team. So now you look at the Toronto Blue Jays in the 2.5 to 3 years since AA decided to go to Los Angeles, and now, of course, through Atlanta. What have Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins actually done?
Well, I thought letting Edwin go for what he ended up signing for was a big mistake.
Which was essentially the same as what they had offered him a couple of weeks earlier, if reports are true.
So whatever happened there in that discussion and negotiation that made them take the same somewhere else, we don't know.
And let's not forget chronologically how that looked. They offered it. They didn't like the fact that Edwin was shopping that number around, so they went out and they got Kendrys Morales and said, well, we've got a guy with comparable numbers, which have turned into terrible numbers. But at the same time, that was the chronological. And then they no longer had a space, need, or budget to get Edwin Encarnacion. Yeah. But beyond that, I think, Niall, and I'm glad that we're at you as we come to this pit stop here on the race course. The fact is, I think you can give a very good passing grade to them as far as what they've done to stock the shelves, because Alex left them with nothing. They didn't have a lot of stuff in the cupboards. They've had to build this one up from scratch. So is it fair to put the blame at their feet because they don't have anything at the major league level, because they haven't been able to bring Edwin back, or they screwed up by signing Joey Bats for an extra year? And I like the fact that they signed Jay Happ. But I look around and I say to myself, is it fair to put the blame when they decided to, of the two evils, rebuild the system at the hands of the major league roster? That's the fork in the road they took.
Absolutely, and that's a very, very tough question to answer. But, you look, as far as what they did with, kind of revisiting history here with Kendrys Morales, they thought the analytics were good on him, the bat speed, the exit velocity, that, how hard he hits the ball, that they thought it was comparable, and they thought maybe getting him out of a hitter's park like Kansas City and moving into Toronto, that was going to lead to more home runs, so maybe they could survive the trade-off of losing Edwin Encarnacion. But yeah, I mean, as far as what they've done up top, maybe not the greatest, but you definitely see what the results that are happening in the farm system. You look at the Lansing Lugnuts, one of the top teams in the Midwest League. New Hampshire having a great year this year. Dunedin maybe not so much, but Buffalo, they're kind of playing 500 ball, but I think that's kind of really a reflection of what's going on at the big league level, of course, with the proximity of the two cities, saying you always have the roster shuffle going on there. But yeah, it's that fork in the road. I mean, yeah, I guess they decided to, maybe pay more attention to the future and maybe sacrifice the present.
Absolutely, and and this is what Niall, this is what Niall alluded to again. Building the minor league system, and you have a lot of solid young players in the minors ready to step up and ready to contribute to the big league club at some point. I just think that again, if we're talking about this season, how it's gone on the major league team, on the major league level, you got to put the blame on the manager not being able to get more out of the group, and that's just the way it is. And how many seasons has Gibbons been on the job? Is that
plenty?
Yeah.
I know that you're trying to shift the blame back there, but for me, if I'm looking at this Blue Jay, and correct me if I'm wrong, the blame, as Lou said a little bit earlier, can be dispersed in a number of different ways. I look at a baseball team from games played and games lost. I'm sorry, I do it in hockey, I do it in football, I do it in majority of sport. I mean, there are certain injuries that just come with the territory. Concussion in hockey, it's going to happen. Concussion in football, it's going to happen. But then I look at dead arm, and I look at certain things that I think to myself, like, we're letting Marcus Stroman dabble with all these different mechanical things that, are philosophically possible, but not the norm. You're coming off a guy with 200 inning years back to back, plus a World Baseball Classic, plus, a lot of torque on a guy that is 5'8". That to me screams somebody needs to say, no, stay the course. This is how we want your players to, this is how we want players to develop within this organization, and this is where you need to go. For me, that is where I place a little bit of the blame here, is in the fact that, look, when the new ownership came in, or pardon me, I shouldn't say new ownership, when the new front office came, they had to make a decision. They're either going to go and buy, which I don't think Rogers was going to let them do based on the 2 years run that they just had, or they were going to try to replenish the minor league system. So even though the major league guys right now are taking it on the chin, I don't blame the front office for it, because I look at the minor league system and say the cavalry's coming. But I look back at the training staff that got refreshed, revamped, came in with their new thing, and within the first 55, 60 games of the season have had 3 separate guys go down with dead arm. That, to me, is inexcusable, especially when you're talking about key pieces that are going down with this symptom that's making its way through the clubhouse.
I can't speak for the training staff or the medical staff, but I recall we've had this discussion in the past, even with the Oakland staff when the Canadians were an Oakland farm team. But, this whole thing about the position the Jays are in, that's probably something that's going to sound very, very familiar to sports fans in Vancouver, because the exact same thing happened with the hockey team here. It was very, very clear to anyone who knew anything about the sport that team needed to be rebuilt. And while they were stocking the farm, the guys at the big team were taking it on the chin for underperforming. Here's one for you. How many guys on the current Toronto Blue Jays roster are younger than Bryce Harper? The answer is 1. So are you going to rebuild where you've got these guys on the farm? If that's the case, start moving these guys who are 34, 35, 36, 37.
I don't think there's any takers. I mean, it's so funny because you have this argument in every sport with every team, and it's all about the dollars and cents. Well, it's time to rebuild. Let's just open up the floodgates and let 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys go. You've got to have a dance partner, and this is the thing that I worry about with the Toronto Blue Jays. I think you can sell Josh Donaldson. I don't know if you get dollar for dollar on Josh Donaldson unless he comes back and has an unbelievable 55, 60 games leading up to the trade deadline. Then you've got probably multiple guys that are interested in what the return is. I'm not going to get into that. I don't think you get more than 50 cents on the dollar for Troy Tulowitzki. I still don't think anybody's even going to come remotely close to that contract. And then you look at the pitchers. You look at a guy like, Marcus Stroman, controllable for another couple of years. Great upside. You take the personality with it, but I think you could at least get something in return for him. Aaron Sanchez, I think Scott Boras is already going to dictate who you can dance with, and I think that contract bleeds out and he goes somewhere to the West Coast. I don't know if there's a lot of pieces here that the Toronto Blue Jays can do the prototypical rebuild. And it's not that I'm trying to contradict you, but I look at this piece 1 through 25. Who's your asset? In any phone call, I guarantee the only phone call that has come through Mark Shapiro or Ross Atkins over the last 4 months is sticky wicket pieces like, okay, well, we'll do a dance with you, but what would it take to get Bo Bichette as a part of that deal? Or, I know that Vladimir Guerrero's untouchable, but what about Anthony Alford? So now you're thinking, okay, I'm going to rebuild by getting rid of some of my major league assets, but the only way that they're going to take those assets are with an attached said prospect that the Blue Jays are trying to show as the future of this organization. So really, you're almost cutting your nose off to spite your face, and this is the problem that this ownership has and the front office has. You just got to weather the storm. And for a Blue Jays fan who's had such success over the last 3 years, that to me, KP, is probably the hardest pill to swallow. Is you assume they've got all this money, and Rogers, the big conglomerate, the big telecommunications company, should go out and play with the big boys. But I don't know if that's the right answer in this moment.
If you're in the wrong division, first of all, if you're in the American League East with New York and Boston, you gotta, if you want to compete with the big boys, you gotta spend like the big boys. Well, maybe not like them, but you gotta, be willing to go and sign free agents. And we talked about this last week. Free agents aren't necessarily going to be interested in coming to Toronto if they see that management isn't willing to put together the team. If they're trying to get rid of players, get rid of Donaldson. And
would you have signed Jake Arrieta this offseason?
I would have.
I would have too.
Yeah, at that price tag, sure.
But the price tag of Jake Arrieta heading into the offseason was probably almost twofold what it ended up being at the end.
Yeah.
I think they ended up getting a great deal on Jake Arrieta at Philadelphia. I think that's a steal. So again, just to forward this, because I think we're all understanding that there are certain components of this organization that need changing.
Yeah.
Do you go out and spend, or do you simply weather the storm?
Well, I think what you need to do internally, and you have to do this in a very, very honest fashion, is say to yourself, okay, when is that next window going to be? Is it going to be 20 or is it going to be 21? And then you start looking at your roster saying, who can contribute at that time? So if we're looking 3 years down the road, okay, you know what? Kevin Pillar will be 32. still might be a slightly plus defensive center fielder. We can hang on to him unless we get a good offer. Stroman, Sanchez, obviously, got to sign them. But I look at the rest of the roster, and with the exception of maybe Dwight Smith Jr., in case he does happen to be the real deal, none of these guys are going to be contributors in 3 years. And I know there's not a lot of takers for a lot of these guys, but you know what? Maybe now you start bringing up some of the talent that you've grown and seeing who can cut it in the majors. And in 3 or 4 years, you're going to have a team that is tight, a la the Kansas City Royals or the Tampa Bay Rays, or you could just crap out. But you've got to find that window that you're going to challenge in and build towards it. Get rid of salary so that when you get to 2020, you can go out and trade for that veteran pitcher like a Justin Verlander at the deadline, get you over the hump.
Well, I think really the big question is, who are the next arms going to be coming up in the Blue Jays system? Right now, maybe kind of a bit of a question mark. I mean, you look at Nate Pearson, and I mean, he was absolutely outstanding when he was here in Vancouver. But right now, bit of a question mark. Is he going to be able to return healthy after he took that line drive in the arm? Hopefully he will be back and throwing 100-mile-an-hour gas when he does come back. And we're not really sure if he is going to be back at all. It'll probably be late this season if he does. You look at maybe Sean Reed Foley. He got promoted from AA to AAA today, and well, his AAA debut did not go well.
Rocked.
Let's put it that way. And certainly the stats for Sean Reed Foley in AA pretty good. 5-0, 2.03 ERA, I believe, and his WHIP was round 1.0. But the one thing that did concern me though was the walks, walking 4 batters every 9 innings, and that's something you need to come down. Ideally, like to see that around maybe 2.5, 3. And, they might be rushing him right now.
All right, we're going to take our break here. By the way, if you're a basketball fan, Western Conference Final, Houston 95, Golden State 94, series tied at 2. There is a minute left in the fourth quarter. Houston by 1. Houston had a 4-point lead. Then all of a sudden there was a 3-pointer that went back the other way. So it is a 1-point game. And right now there's a bit of an officiating conversation. But again, Rockets are a minute away from going up 3-2 on Golden State in a best-of-7 series that has been as good as advertised. We'll take a break here. When we come back, Chantel Chan with an update. KP Weed, Niall O'Donohoe, and Lou Filippo joining me. I'm Rob Fay, and this is Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. And the Rockets have just beaten the Warriors 98-94. Houston has taken a 3-2 series lead on Golden State. I'm Rob Fay. That is KP Wee, Niall O'Donohoe, Lou Filippo. Dude, they had a chance to win the game in Houston.
Draymond blew it on 2 straight plays. First one there, he gets that rebound, just decides to double fist it out to who knows. Anyway, it's Draymond.
I don't know. It reminds me of Ernest Biner in the fumble. I don't know. Just mishandled it. Just lost the handle.
Oh, man.
I'd love to see him trade the
grenade with the
OKC and watch him and Westbrook try and collapse games on their own. Anyway.
All right. With a chance to win, Draymond Green just absolutely kicked that ball. All right, 8:30 in Vancouver. A half hour still to go of Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice. I'll stick around. We've got we've got Rob Fay Nation Radio coming up from 9 till 11. Just 2 shows left. Tonight, tomorrow, and then we'll pack it in and get ready for Canadians baseball. All right, gentlemen, we're talking about the Toronto Blue Jays. Let's shift gears and let's talk about Major League Baseball. It's going to start out as a generic question, but we'll definitely flesh this out. If you were to say a team that has underachieved this year and a team that has overachieved, I don't need in what order. I just want to know where you're thinking. And beyond just, of course, wins and losses, I sit around and I say to myself, teams that are overachieving, Boston. I didn't know they were 34-16. I didn't know that they would have the best record in all of baseball 50 games into the season. I thought this was going to be the Yankees world. We all live into it. Boston, they usually, they underachieve, but everybody right now is towing the rope the right way. Who is overachieving in your eyes so far this season?
Alex Anthopoulos and the Atlanta Braves. Who the heck saw this coming? Well, that whole division is upside down right now, except for the Marlins. They're pretty much where they should be. But you've got Atlanta and the Phillies both chipping away at 600. And then you've got the Mets and the Nationals behind them. And the Nationals would certainly be your underachiever. But Atlanta, there's no way saw that coming. And then a close second would be Milwaukee. Same thing, didn't see that coming.
Well, Philadelphia, I think they've really overachieved, especially when you consider how the first week of that season went, when I think the Philly fan base, they were ready to run Gabe Kapler out of town for some very questionable managerial decisions, but they have righted the ship since then. And certainly, I think the National League West, I think that's probably the one division right there that is completely surprising. You have the LA Dodgers, they're starting to come on a little bit now, and considering their struggles, they're only 3.5 games back of Colorado, and I think all of those teams, Colorado, yeah, I know they did make the playoffs last year, but I was expecting them to maybe take a step back, but they're hanging right in there in the National League West.
Well, the Phillies and the Braves have been surprising for sure. I'll look at the Arizona Diamondbacks. I know they've had a tough time the last couple of weeks, but how they started out this season, not losing a series until the month of May. Just a great story until the recent hiccup. So the Diamondbacks for sure, one of them. The Phillies, Atlanta. As far as underachievers, got to look at the Angels as one of them. The Dodgers. The Nationals, but I would say out of those teams, the Nationals will probably have the best chance of, bouncing back. Just that team in Washington just has got too much talent to continue struggling, and you would expect sooner or later that Atlanta and Philadelphia would come back down to earth.
Alex Anthopoulos, I always thought, got a bit of a bum rap in Toronto based on the way that he left, in the fact that everybody assumed that he wanted to drive the bus himself. Mark Shapiro came in, and obviously that wasn't going to happen, so he wanted to take his talents elsewhere. I know that Atlanta hasn't been built necessarily by Alex Anthopoulos, but considering the hand that he was dealt early on with the, lost draft picks and everything that they did international-wise, and they lost their slot money, what Alex Anthopoulos has done, just even with the experiment of Jose Bautista, but then to cut bait, knowing that they were going to go a different direction. I think he is, if I was to give Alex Anthopoulos a letter grade through the first 50 games of the Braves season, it's an A. Like, I think what he's been able to do to quell the waters, bring up his top prospect, which is going to obviously help, and then, of course, try Jose Bautista, but even though there was a tie to him, cut bait after just a handful of games, I think he's pushed all the right buttons so far.
Yeah, being a good manager doesn't just mean, I'm talking about general manager, making the moves. Sometimes the best moves you make are the ones that you don't make.
Yep.
And obviously, no one saw this coming with Atlanta, and he's being very patient here. And the fact that he's not, cutting Batista loose a month after signing him, that's a very good sign. And if you're a player playing in Atlanta, you've got a guy who had some success in Toronto and then went over to the Dodgers, and that team made the World. He's got a track record there. He's
starting to become one of the more reputable guys in Major League Baseball as well. Everybody thought that he was Paul Beeston's boy, but now that he's gotten out from that shadow, he has a little bit of a tenure with Los Angeles. Now he's the front man in Atlanta. I think people are starting to realize that this guy can, in fact, do things at the Major League level. Early on, I kind of felt like he was the Dave Nonis of the Toronto Blue Jays, the guy that couldn't get out from that big personality, that, of course, being Paul Beeston. But now we're starting to see that he can, in fact, do things on his own. Should the Toronto Blue Jays not have success over the next couple of years, it's going to cost somebody more than just John Gibbons' job. In light of where you go, we see with the Toronto Maple Leafs, they hired the young up-and-comer, the young, Kyle Dubas, and you see what they're doing right there in hockey. Toronto's expectations for front-end talent when it comes to the front office is going to intensify. If you're the Toronto Blue Jays in 2020 and all of a sudden you decide that you're not going to go that way, do you go to somebody who is analytics, that he is a young geek or nerd or whatever you want to call it, that is just going to bury his head in his computer? Or do you still look for a baseball guy? And I say those as in A and B because, KP, for example, you look at a guy like Kyle Dubas, doesn't look like a guy that's played a whole lot of hockey in his life, but looks like he could analytically build yourself an NHL hockey team. Or you look at a guy like Mark Hunter, a guy with experience, then you translate that to baseball, a baseball guy. Where do you think the Blue Jays would go next, analytically, or do you think they would actually get somebody that's got a bit of a pedigree?
Well, I can't speak for the Blue Jays, but I know what I would do if I were in charge, and that would be you look for a baseball guy because they know what. With the amount of experience that they have had in the game, you can't replace that. You can't, that's something that you can't overlook. I know that there's been a trend going more towards analytics and all this, but for me personally, I'm still not an analytics guy. I still say you go with the experience with baseball, a guy who's played or a guy who's been in baseball for a number of years, as an executive. That's what I would look for, if I were going to, bring in new management.
Everybody thinks that deals are done on a one-on-one basis. I can't think that there would be a Major League Baseball phone call that has just one person on each line anymore. But I do think at the end of the day, you need the proverbial closer. You need a guy that gets past the analytics. So, for example, it's like in any sales job. If you're driving around tonight, maybe you can relate to what we're talking about in the sense that you get the guy that comes in, tells you that you need the insurance, tells you if you don't buy the insurance, your house might burn down and you get nothing. Those are the guys that set the stage and say that, in 15% of the homes that don't have insurance, this is what happens. But then you've got a guy who has to sell it. And I just wonder right now, and I say this lovingly, and I do have a relationship to the Vancouver Canadians. I'll put that out there straight ahead. But I often wonder, in looking at different regimes, Blue Jays included, if they truly have a front man that can sell it. Because you've got a couple of guys that show real well in front of the camera. I mean, I've met Ross Atkins, I've met Mark Shapiro, but I sit here and I say to myself, it's one thing to be a good analytics guy and a good guy that says the right things in front of the camera. It's another guy to go to a different team's president and a different team's GM and sell the idea that will essentially make your team better by getting the best of another team. I don't know if the Blue Jays have that in their current state.
The Blue Jays were spoiled because, of course, for a very, very long time, they had Paul Beeston and Pat Gillick. Pat Gillick's in the Hall of Fame. Paul Beeston, I think, eventually will actually get there as a builder. The fact that he was the president of the American League for a couple of years tells you what kind of respect he has around baseball.
And he worked at the head offices as well.
Yeah, and so that's what you're talking about. The fellow who's going to make the phone call and say, whatever. Hey, Theo, it's Paul Beeston talking. And Theo's going to listen. Theo Epstein, obviously. But I don't think that exists anymore either. They've gone to, and no knock on the current guys. Let's face it, they've only been there for a couple of years. But I don't see that oomph. That, like you were saying, Rob, that closer that's going to make that call and be able to actually draw top talent from another team like they could have before. And I still think it was a mistake letting Alex go, but that's a story for another day.
Well, he went on his own accord. We do have to justify that.
Yeah.
No, because they weren't going to give him the keys, according to the report.
Correct, right? And at that point, I think he had actually earned the keys. So even though he went on his own accord, let's just say he was kind of gently shown the way out as well. Mutual parting, I guess, is the word they like to use.
Well, I don't know. As you mentioned, as far as personalities go in the front office, maybe there really isn't like a Billy Beane type personality where, he's not afraid to, just pursue what he wants and go after it aggressively. It's hard to say really what this front office, how they interact with other teams. We really have no idea, but they don't seem like the kind of guys who would be like a Billy Beane type personality. Of course, you go off the movie Moneyball, and of course, if you read the book and all some of the anecdotes that have come out of that. So, no, maybe there isn't really somebody who really can just sell what they're trying to.
The only reason that I bring it up is it's not a hatchet job on Shapiro and Atkins, but if they're going to rebuild this team, they're going to have to sell some of the guys that they have as assets that other teams might not analytically think are assets. For example, let's take the white elephant in the room. What would it take to get rid of Troy Tulowitzki? What would it take to get somebody else to take on the remaining portion of that contract? Well, if you want to take on Troy Tulowitzki's contract and, the fact that he's pretty fragile, it's probably going to come with a couple of your prospects. That would just make common sense to me. If somebody was that naive to take on that contract, which I think is up there as one of the worst in baseball, only because he's as fragile as he is. If he was healthy, Troy Tulowitzki's still a fantastic baseball player. But KP, this is what I'm trying to say here, is you've got you've got the need to somewhat rebuild this team. I don't think it's a retool. I do think it's a rebuild because, again, if you can't beat the top two teams in your division, you got to be moving, not going. But you've got to sell this to a team that's willing to take on some of your assets that are no longer worth what they were when you signed them to those gaudy numbers. And that's why I think I bring this up. So who do you think is the easiest sell for the Toronto Blue Jays right now? Obviously, Josh Donaldson. I'm not even going to put him in the conversation because he's the golden ticket. But of the other guys, like even if we were to bring in some of the other names, Dalton Pompey, if we were to bring in a Troy Tulowitzki, if we were to bring in a guy like Justin Smoke, who I don't know if I'd trade, but again, he's an asset, where would you go?
You got to look at the guys that are going to bring back value. And the names that you just mentioned, that just listed, Tulowitzki, I don't see how anybody's going to take on that contract or take on this unless there's, the Blue Jays are willing to pay for a major chunk of his salary and also be willing to give up some great big prospects. You look at a guy like Granderson. He's signed for a year. I think that one he could be traded. I don't think you need any kind of persuasion for that one. Kendry Morales, what are you going to do with him? It's going to be a tough sell, Rob, and I just think that you're right. They do need to rebuild, but how are you going to convince other teams to take your parts? It's going to be a tough sell.
I mean, at some point, though, right, you're going to have to start clearing roster spots, and you might not get anything close to the dollar.
There's no way, yeah.
No, of course.
I agree.
I mean, Russell Martin's in the same boat, unless you happen to have a team that's got a really young pitching staff and think they have a chance, and they can afford to have no production behind the plate. But at some point, you're going to have to figure that out and do it. I mean, really, the big kingmaker here still, assuming that he can get fully healthy and produce, is Josh Donaldson. And that's where it kind of starts. I don't think any of these dominoes are going to fall until they move Donaldson. And I think it's pretty clear there's absolutely no reason for them to make even an attempt to re-sign him at this point, because he'll be 36, 37 before this team's any good, and then he'll just be another anchor a la Russell Martin.
Yeah, I think Donaldson's as good as gone. And I think everybody knows it, and you're just trying to sell it to a fan base right now that's not ready to let go of the magic. All right, we'll take our break here. When we come back, our final segment. Vancouver Canadians are now just days away from the 2018 season. We got some tickets. We're going to give them away on the other side of the break. You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. How about this? Your choice. We called it the ladies' choice. Any regular season game of the season. You get to pick one date, and we will get you 4 tickets to see the Vancouver Canadians this season. 604-280-1040, 604-280-1040, and we will see if we can load up those lines and make sure that we can make you a part of our summer. By the way, the Vancouver Canadians will open up their season on Wednesday, June the 20th. The home portion of the schedule is brought to you by Whistler Brewing, and the first 2,500 fans will get themselves a good old-fashioned, what do they call that? Magnetic schedule, the thing that you put on the side of your fridge. I would love for you to have the opportunity to go out and see any game that you want this year. All right, so Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donoghue, KPW, final thoughts. We got a lot of things coming out to the ballpark this year. We will see Cliff Floyd. We will see former American League MVP Justin Morneau. Mookie Wilson will be stopping by. JP Arancibia will be stopping by. Lots of stuff to come to the ballpark, but your favorite night or day of the year, is there one in particular?
I love Dog Day Afternoon.
Yes, I was just going to say Dog Days.
Absolutely love Dog Day Afternoon. It's just, dogs have such incredibly different personalities, and you just kind of see them through the stands, and you've got the ones who are doing nothing, and you've got some, rest. I love Dog Day Afternoon.
Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. By the way, Dog Day of Summer presented by Pecurian is July the 9th. KP, you have yet to answer, my fine friend. Where would you go?
One of the Sunday afternoon games. It's thrilled with the A&W root beer floats, and also after the game, seeing all the kids running around the bases. I think it's a cool thing that the Canadians are doing on Sundays when they have afternoon games, just to see those kids, the smile on their faces. I think that's absolutely priceless. I would say one of those afternoons to catch a ball.
You had a heart like that, KP. I thought you were going to go fireworks and all that stuff. I don't know. All right, let's go to Ayaz on Surrey. Ayaz, congratulations. How you doing tonight?
Excellent. Yourself?
Fantastic. We got a lot of choices for you here. We got opening night. We got one of our Superstar series, a nooner. Have you decided yet?
Not sure. I was thinking about a fireworks extravaganza night.
You're a wise person. Those are all sellouts, man. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put you back on hold. Chantel is going to get your information. You and I will connect. We'll pick that game, and you and 3 of your guests are going. Thank you for listening. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anytime. All right. So there we go. A as in Surrey. My day is opening day. I think, and you know what's funny? Canadians President Andy Dunn hates opening day because, that's, where the curtain pulls back for the first time of the year and away you go. But this year's special because you're coming off a championship, so you get the banner that goes up onto the pole out there in right center field. Everybody's buzzed because they're waiting 9.5 months for baseball. It's finally back. So if you were to ask me, I would go with opening day. Although I want to see Mookie Wilson. I've interviewed Bill Buckner, so now you get the other side of the equation.
The other side of it, 1986.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, it would be great. I mean, I see exactly where Andy's coming from this because, I was there for quite a while. And opening day is just, you're nervous. I mean, I know, Rob, you've been doing your thing there with the play-by-play. Every game is the thing. But it's very, very nervous when your game stays staffed for opening day because you've done your rehearsals, you've gone through this, you've arranged everything. And now you're just kind of waiting. And I just kind of remember the year we cranked out the scoreboard. There's only 3 eyes I was concerned about. And that was Jake, Jeff, and Andy. And I could have had a child that night. But it's opening day is nerve-wracking.
Everything's got to be perfect on opening day.
I'd actually like to know more about how you would have had a child that night.
Well, just saying.
I love opening day because you get to see all the players line up. You get to see who's who on the hometown 9 and beyond. I mean, I always love the introduction, seeing the players go through the handshakes and trying to figure out, okay, who's this number this year, who's that number this year, and that's what I love about opening day.
Pronunciations. I was in Edmonton this past week. My daughter was at the National Volleyball Championships. I saw 3 separate Vancouver Canadian hats.
Nice.
Which I thought was kind of cool, man. I actually went around Edmonton looking for a Trapper's hat to no avail. I did not find the former. I think they were an affiliate of the Florida Marlins, actually, when they were in their last year.
Yeah.
That's not to stretch you.
The Expos, too, I believe. I believe they were affiliated with the Expos when they...
Vancouver had an affiliation with the Expos for 1 year. They were half Expos, half Seattle Pilots. I think it was 69.
Right.
That sounds like it was 68. Know your stuff. But anyways, all right. So we'll do this again next week. Again, my thanks to Lou Filippo, KP Wee, Niall O'Donohoe. And by the way, now, shout out your blog. Come on, hit me with it.
Absolutely. It's csplusbaseball.ca. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at csplusbaseball. Lots of good stuff on there. Just finished interviews with Casey Clemens. I put one up of Travis Bergen today. So basically, a lot of the 2017 Canadians, I've been getting around to them, and so lots of stuff to check out, and certainly looking forward to opening day and covering all that.
Awesome. Lou, what's your Twitter handle again?
So Lou says.
Yes, and you're all over the TransLink stuff right now.
Are you kidding? Well, let's not get into that. Let's just say Morgan Freeman worked out well.
Not well. And KP, what's your Twitter handle?
KPWEE1.
KP takes on all the stuff that nobody wants to talk to, and he'll go right at you. If you have any baseball chatter and you want to have an opponent, KP's your guy. He'll go. I'm at Rob Fay Nation, and if you want, you can stick around because Rob Fay Nation Radio starts on the other side of this break. I'm jacked. I'm ready to talk about Draymond and those hands. Draymond's hand. You know what? I'm just going to say it. Draymond took the inbound pass with about 6 seconds left and looked like the guy that fought Harrison Ford on the steps during the movie The Fugitive. I'll leave it at that. I'll explain on the other side. This has been Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice right here on TSN 1040.
This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal in Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.